With the first two album releases, it was becoming clear that John was establishing himself as the group's most prominent lead singer. The next four releases in 1964 would demonstrate that this trend would only get stronger. John was ready to establish himself as the group's unquestionable and natural leader, whether he was the main vocalist or the songwriter. At this point, even the other Beatles agreed that John was their leader. The first Lennon-McCartney original to be recorded for With the Beatles, It Won't Be Long became the opening track. Establishing a call-and-response structure, it reuses the Yeah 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 choruses of She Loves You as the band's trademark. Its structure, however, is unusual. It begins with a minor chorus, transitions to a brief major verse, and then returns to the chorus. Every bar has John Lennon written all over it, particularly the one that is abruptly removed to speed up the song. Everything is centered around lazy semitones, which are pursued by augmentations in sixths, typical of John's later style in the bridge. The word please was used twice in the song Please Please Me, first as a request and then as an action. This time, John used the words belong to refer to ownership and be long to indicate a period of time. In many years from now, Paul recalls, I was doing literature at school, so I was interested in plays on words. John didn't do literature, but he was quite well read, so he was interested in that kind of thing. We both liked to try and get a bit of double meaning in, so that was the high spot of writing that particular song. We would spot the double meaning. I think everyone did, by the way. It was not just the genius of us. Paul recalls the day John brought the song in July of '63. John mainly sang it, so I think it was his original idea, but we both sat down and wrote it together. Their goal was to write a follow-up single to the unreleased song She Loves You. History reveals that It Won't Be Long didn't go out as a single at all, nor did it become the Beatles' following single. The focus was on writing a song for their upcoming single that would resonate mainly with American listeners. This is not to say that George Martin thought It Won't Be Long was a letdown. Rather, he was always searching for a good potboiler to open a new Beatles album, and this great song was just what they needed for their second album.
It Won't Be Long.
Won't Be Long was my attempt at writing another single. I never quite made it though. It Won't Be Long was the one where the guy in the Times London wrote about the aeolian cadences of the chords at the end, which started the whole intellectual bit about Beatles. But I still don't hear any aeolian cadences because I don't know what they are. Sound like exotic birds.
Recorded over the course of 2 sessions on July 30th, during which the Beatles rushed to the Playhouse Theatre to record 2 shows for the BBC. It Won't Be Long required 23 takes to get it just right, despite the fact that George's guitar licks sound too isolated from the rest of the song, and the bass feels too light. The track, which was weirdly never included in the live set, has their signature intensity, dramatic move shifts, and abrupt crescendo turnarounds. Their lip-synced performance of the song on March 20th, 1964, suggests that the complicated arrangement of the song might have discouraged them from performing it live. The group performs the song badly, as though they haven't played it since they recorded it the previous year. John also clearly forgets the words. The Beatles were more intellectual, so they appealed on that level too, John said in David Sheff's book All We Are Saying. But the basic appeal of the Beatles was not their intelligence, it was their music. It was only after some guy in the London Times said they were aeolian cadences in It Won't Be Long that middle classes started listening to it because somebody put a tag on it. The song swings from harsh twist-beat pace to a sophisticated miracle-style bridge before cheesily concluding on one of the group's signature barbershop major sevenths. Tape was precious back then, and the Beatles' early recording attitude was to pack it tight without a single dull second being wasted. Given that he wrote and sang the majority of the songs on their first albums, It Won't Be Long was only one of many examples of John's leadership. It was not until yesterday that Paul's supporting role appeared to change. After that, John would progressively grow tired of his desire for domination and give Paul more responsibility as the group's primary songwriter and unofficial leader.
And I don't mind getting it clear and on the record, at least my version of history anyway. It's pretty obvious, you know, if anybody who really studies the music and the lines, you can usually pick it out. Not just by who sings it, but by the style of writing.
When we started off with the Beatles, John and I sat down to write some songs, and we wrote about the first 50 or so, out of which I think Love Me Do is the only one ever got published. The rest just vanished in the mist of time. Except I've got a notebook somewhere under masses of everything that's got them written down. The thing at the time we were trying to do, which made those songs not very good, was one of the things we were trying to find the next beat. Because everyone was talking about it, all the musicals, it was in New Musical Express then, a lot more gentle paper than it is now. It's like a long time ago. And they were talking about rock calypso, you know, Latin rock is going to be the next. And we used to sit around there thinking, now what's going to be the next beat? And we'd write. And the minute we stopped trying to find that next beat, the newspaper said, it's Mersey beat. And we found that we'd discovered the next beat without even trying to discover it. And so that was what made me suspicious of categories and trying to find this and this and that, and putting everyone into, they're the heavy metal because they wear leather and they go louder. They're the more sort of ballady because they do that. Like, I've never felt in any particular sort of group, you know. My musical tastes range from like Fred Astaire to the Sex Pistols, you know, and through everything else.
He provided you know, a lightness to some of where I would always go for the sevenths and the ninths and the discords. He would say, well, why don't you change that there? You know, you've done that note 50 times in the song, you know, I'll grab a note and ram it home. In the early days, we wrote much more stuff, you see. Later on, it became like Sgt. Pepper's 9 months, you know, making a record. In the early days, we'd make a record in 12 hours or something. And they'd want a single every 3 months, and we'd have to be writing it literally in the hotel or in a van. So the cooperation was functional as well as musical.
There's people who used to ask us, what comes first, the words or the music, or Lennon and McCartney, who does what? It was never. It was always, well, we all do a bit of everything. I sometimes write words, he sometimes writes words, I sometimes write a tune, he sometimes writes a tune. Words sometimes come first, tunes sometimes come first. And everything always had this kind of...